2, 3, 4, 5. Test time.
It's time for me to fly.
Great. Okay. It looks like it's back now.
Okay.
Yeah, the audio input capture was, the screen was blank. I plugged it, I took it, and plugged it back. I wonder if that was the thing, the USB thing it was telling us about earlier. We got a USB not working flash.
Could be.
Okay. Just caught on. All right. It takes about 20 seconds, for this thing to, they should, 20 or 30 seconds. Okay, okay. Yep, all right. We're back. All right. So, I don't know if you guys heard anything I said, so I'll start from the top. Hopefully Mike Michette will be joining us later. I tried calling him, but the call's not going through. So, I sent him an email. Hopefully he'll call us, because we're going to be talking about these Douglas World Cruisers. Also, I had to buy an airline ticket because my airline doesn't go directly where I need to go. And, oh, the shame, an airline pilot with a revenue ticket. That's a heresy. So, anywho, start off with the Douglas World Cruisers. For those who are not big aviation buffs, in 1924, the U.S. Army bought 5 airplanes that were designed for a trip around the world. One was a trainer, and 4 were to make the trip, and 2 of them actually completed it. This is 1924, when the airplane was only 21 years old, and somehow recently I wound up looking, you know what it was? I was watching Rex's Hangar, and he did that really excellent video on Douglas aircraft, and the first section he talked a lot about the World Cruisers, and I remember I had those models from Williams Brothers. And by the way, these pictures I'm showing you are courtesy of Mike Michette, and we're going to talk about these in just a little bit. So, anyway, that's about a 3-foot model of the World Cruiser they have, I believe, at the museum in Santa Monica, where one of the World Cruisers is in storage as we speak. So, oh, by the way, guys, before I get into it, anybody asks, Ken's not with us right now. He's stuck in his dinghy without a motor or a cell phone. And I'm sure he'll be telling us about that story later. So,
Or not.
Or not. He'll try to hide from it. We won't let him get off the hook that easy. So, these airplanes were based on an airplane called the DT-2. This was the Navy's first, I believe their first dedicated torpedo bomber. And it was designed specifically to Navy specifications. I looked around. I could not find a kit model of one anywhere. I don't know if anybody's ever kitted this particular airplane. And they didn't make that many of them, but it's kind of an important airplane. Well, anyway, it was the basis, mind you, for the World Cruiser design. And so luckily Douglas did not have to start off with a clean sheet of paper. This man, General Patrick, was head of the Air Force in the 20s. And he's the one that said, hey, I think it'd be a great idea if we were to make some airplanes go around the world, because after World War I, the Air Force, or the Army Air Service, had been completely gutted. And President Coolidge was not a big aviation supporter. He saw it as a toy. He pretty much defunded them. So Patrick felt that we needed to do something. It was the day when everybody was setting records. Of course, aviation was new, so every time you went up, it was a new record of some sort. But this man was really the driving force behind it. And he selected a Major Martin, the tall gentleman there, to head up the program. And by the way, a lot of the pilots who flew this trip were in their 30s and were still second lieutenants. That's how bad things were in the military following the First World War. But Major Martin, an impressive guy. And unfortunately, and there's plenty of documentaries out there. I'm giving the super short story. The 4 airplanes set off out of Seattle and up Alaska, and they were going that way around the globe. Unfortunately, they had to fly real low because of fog. Major Martin wound up flying into terrain because he couldn't see it until it was too late. And he and his sergeant both survived the crash, and it was he and Sergeant Harvey. And they had to, and here's a picture, they literally had to walk out of the Alaskan wilderness. It took about 10 days. Survive. I mean, it's a story of survival. That in itself is probably one of the most impressive parts of the story. But they made it back. They both survived. No one was killed on this trip, although another airplane went down over water, and they tried to tow it to shore and almost made it, but was damaged and started sinking, and they wound up having to leave it behind. But two of the airplane.
Matt,
Uh-huh.
try calling Mike again. There is a text from him that says standing by waiting for your call.
Okay, I'm going to try again. Here we go. The joys of using telephones. I mean, I'm so sophisticated here. It's ringing.
This is Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, I'm
You there? Mike? Oh, now.
You there?
Yeah, I got Steve on the line also. I think it was doing the merge.
okay. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Great.
So,
How's things out in the land of in and out?
Well, a little cooler this week, thankfully, and we're enjoying the 80s weather instead of 100 and whatever. But things are good, and again, great to be with you. Hello to all the Glue Troopers, and looking forward to talking about a really amazing event and some amazing airplanes.
Glad to have you here, and at least it's not Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah, first Canada, then Hawaii. What's all these places catching on fire that never catch on fire?
Right.
Anyway, Major Martin and Sergeant Harvey managed to walk out of the Alaskan wilderness, and Martin said that he was so brokenhearted because he was the leader of the mission that he wanted to die. He was just so. But when the guys all made it back, when the trip was over, he joined them, and everybody was happy. No one was killed. Everyone survived, and he went on to become a general. So I mean, he had a very successful career. From what little I know of him, seems like a really impressive guy. Now, I'm going to cover some material real quick, and then we're going to loop back, now that we got Mike with us to add some flourish. Now, there's another gentleman that I stumbled onto completely a Glue Trooper actually sent me a link to a video, and that's Bob and Diane Dempster, and he actually built a replica of the World Cruiser, which exists today. It's up in the Great Northwest. I believe it's near Seattle. It does fly. He wants to go around, repeat their mission, fly it around the world, and it does have a Liberty engine. I will talk about that a little bit. I'm just flabbergasted that somebody was able. That someone could actually make a copy of this airplane in itself is a staggering thing. Mike, are you familiar with Bob Dempster and this airplane?
Yes, I am. The couple actually came to the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica to research our airplane for theirs, and I met them both, very devoted folks to aviation history, and they spent a couple of days checking out our machine and capturing as much technical information and cosmetics as they possibly could. Really nice folks, and I thought it was very appropriate that I believe they made their first flight from Boeing Field. Yes,
that's correct.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about something. I actually, when I was on, they have a website, and they have a place to send a message. Just told me we'd be talking about it on the live stream tonight on the off chance I get the email and decide to check in, but I don't know how they managed to finance something like this, but just the undertaking. I know it took almost 16 years to build the airplane, but they're building this from scratch. And I'm thinking, model building's one thing, but when you do a 1-to-1 scale operating copy, that takes some pretty insane research and skill and resources. But what I was thinking was, and Mike, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit. I know you actually physically touched some of these airplanes.
Yep.
It seems like it's a testament to Douglas's, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Dempsters. It's an amazing accomplishment, but I guess the straightforward or simple or effective design that someone in a hangar could repeat it.
There's a bit to that. Going back to an earlier point you made in terms of the age of aviation when this feat was accomplished, the Douglas Company was less than 4 years old. And they had a modicum of success with their Navy airplanes, and they were, an up-and-coming entity, much like Jack Northrop and the Lockheed brothers, and the earliest phases of all the great companies that came years later. But I just wanted to make the point that the flight of the world cruisers and the slogan that was associated with that, first around the world, became part of the Douglas logo, and that is what put the Douglas Aircraft Company on the map. Mm-hmm. And their path to immense success with the transports was basically taking a world cruiser type airplane and putting 6 to 8 passengers inside the fuselage. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of different types of, the Cloudster, different iterations of transports, but that's where it all began. So this is a hugely influential, consequential airplane beyond the world flight. But again, the company was less than 4 years old when this happened.
Well, they had something like 40 or 50 engines, or 15 engines around the globe to replace the Liberty engines. And I'm just wondering if Bob and Diane ever, and I think last I saw, the last thing I could find was they're hoping this year or maybe next year to make the flight, which, by the way, would be the 100th anniversary.
Right.
I'm wondering what they're planning to do as far as replacement engines going, because I'm understanding that's a real Liberty engine in there, and I don't think it's going to make a 25,000-mile flight.
Yeah, to be fair, I've lost touch with that whole thing, and I apologize. I'm not current. As I said, I did meet them when they were with us for a couple of days. I was very impressed by the effort. The museum supported them 100%. But I don't know what their current plans are right now, though.
Well, I just wanted to mention them. They do have a website, and you can look up Bob and Diane Around the World Flight. It'll take you to it. Yeah. But I wanted to, going back to the cruisers here, the originals, let me just blow that up a little bit and let people look at the airplanes instead of me. I've read about them, but since you've, I just noticed, I think one of those photos may have been backwards, like the 2 was reversed. But can you just describe these airplanes to us?
I'd be happy to. And in a word, when I walked into the hangar and saw the New Orleans for the first time, it literally took my breath away. It was much like walking next to a P-47 or a 105. It was an immense airplane. It was huge, and it was on wheels at that point. And I'm trying to remember. I don't believe we modified the tail wheel. I think it still had the original skid. But it was just an immense airplane, and looking up at it looked like you were looking up at a 2-story building to see the cockpits. I touched the fabric. I looked at it. It was just in beautifully preserved condition. And I wanted to mention too that the world flight actually began in Santa Monica. They left on wheels from Clover Field in Santa Monica, March 24th, 1924. And returned 6 months later, but the Seattle official starting point in Seattle is where they converted to floats. And the reason for that, if I may, is that because the aviation network in the world was non-existent at that time, they used Navy cruisers stationed around the global route. By our count, there were 62 stops in 6 months on the trip. We have a map in the museum that shows all the different stops. And Max, if you'd like, I can expand a little bit on what we have in the museum.
Please do.
Okay. The quick story is that the New Orleans ship number 4 was given to the museum in 1989 when the original museum opened on the north side of Santa Monica Airport, and it was hanging from the ceiling. It was absolutely magnificent. It was a 3-story high building, and there were balconies where you could go up on the 3rd floor and look right at the World Cruiser hanging from the ceiling. Unfortunately, in 1994, we had the massive Northridge earthquake. And even though that was in the San Fernando Valley, which is about 25 miles north of Santa Monica, for some reason the seismic wave that went through the city hit Santa Monica pretty hard. And so the World Cruiser was suspended from the ceiling and wound up swinging back and forth during the earthquake, damaging every corner of it. It was, it took some hits, wingtips and tail and everything else. And so it was then lowered to the ground and repaired. But it was never rehung in the museum, which closed in 2003. So it stayed in the hangar at Santa Monica Airport, And then our museum, the second iteration, opened on the south side, a smaller building, in 2012. And I was involved from the beginning. I became curator in 2018. And the airplane was in our hangar at the airport. I saw it many, many times. I was even contracted to touch up, not repaint, but touch up the logo to make it presentable. The issue that we had is that we needed a large display space. Our museum did not have anywhere near the room to display the airplane, so we were trying to raise funds to have a wing added on to the building to display the cruiser. But there were other forces at work that never happened, and I'll just leave it that the airplane is now in storage somewhere in Southern California, and that's it. But standing next to that historic, iconic piece of machinery, again, Max, and Steve, the thing, I'm stammering here because I couldn't believe that an airplane that looked that modern was built 100 years ago. That was my first impression. Is this the metalwork and the engine and everything about it looked much later than the 1920s, and I was just astonished. But moving on forward, the museum currently has the compass from the airplane. And Max, as a pilot, I think you'll appreciate this. The compass that they used to fly around the world has the degrees indicated every 10 degrees. Swear to God. So it's 0, 1, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 3, 0. Nothing in between. No D10s at all. No tick marks. And it's in a display case that's on wheels, and we shake it to show visitors that the numerals wobble in the water, inside the compass. And the thing is wobbling around, so you can imagine in flight what that thing was doing.
Yeah, that's probably why they didn't bother with anything less than 10-degree increments, because it's swinging back and forth between them. Do the math. So you've got the Earth indicator compass, and that, by the way, is that stalk on the top of the fuselage there. That's the input for the Earth indicator compass, much like Lindbergh had on his flight. And then on the tail, on the horizontal stabilizer, which was yellow, they had dark blue wind drift lines radiating out from the center. So the navigator in the rear cockpit would turn around and take a sighting and look at the wind drift, comparing the airplane's course to. I was wondering with those stripes on the tail.
Horizontals.
Hold on, I've got it.
The compass, that, and the stopwatch is how they got around the world in 1924.
Yeah, in fact, you know what? I got the box right here. Hold on. I can actually, let me take this picture down real quick. Okay. What Mike is talking, there we go. What Mike is talking about is right here on the horizontal. You guys will see it in about 20 seconds. There's a bit of a delay. There's these stripes on the horizontal stabilizer. I assume they were for like visibility, high visibility or something. But I get it now. The guy in the back could turn around and see where the track is at, and to tell him, hey, we're 10, 20, 30 degrees of crab or whatever to help read the wind. Okay.
Yeah, that was the world's first E6B computer, right?
It's just as powerful as the Apollo computer.
Yeah, now, nothing against the model, but the lines on the actual airplane were, how do I want to say this? The outboard stripes were at more of an angle to the rear cockpit than what's shown there.
Okay. I remember that when I put it together. There are a couple of photos online somewhere, I'm sure. Now, one of the things, getting to the model, I have to give Williams Brothers credit for. This is one of their only 1/72nd scale kits. And I do like how this cover shows it with the wheels and the, kind of in between, pulling the wheels off and pulling the floats off, putting the wheels on, showing both. Back, and I'd actually emailed Mike about this. There was a little confusion because of different paint schemes. The olive drab one, the solid olive drab, was the trainer. All of the planes that went across around the globe had the high visibility yellow. In case they went down, they could be found. Although, and Mike, correct me if I'm making any mistakes here, but the super short story is the four of them took off. Unfortunately, the major had, was Martin, had a little trouble, so he had to catch up to them going across Alaska with the super low fog. Everybody was hugging the water, probably close to ground effect.
Correct.
And and a wall of ice came looming. I don't know if it was an iceberg or terrain, but came looming out of the fog at him. And basically he was lucky. The terrain he hit was pretty sloped, so when he tried to pull up, they hit flat, which is why they survived. But they had to, like I say, it took them 10 days. They had to walk out. And that's, if you've ever been to Alaska, that's no minor undertaking. And then,
and part of the survival aspect is the cruise speed of the airplane.
Yeah.
The floats gave it a pretty good drag penalty, and so with wheels, the top speed was 103 or 106, something like that, and with floats, the cruise speed was around 80 miles an hour. So if they pulled up at the last minute and slowed down even more, that was a significant piece of how they were able to survive that collision with the ground, because they weren't going that fast.
And his description in the documentary I saw said that one of the floats took most of the hit and folded up under the airplane, and that basically absorbed some of the basically a large airbag.
Absorbed a lot of energy.
And amazingly, they weren't even really hurt. I mean, other than their pride, but the to be honest with you, I'm more amazed. The most amazing part of the trip is that they walked 10 days out and survived. I mean, that's
right.
But I trained in the infantry in Alaska. Let me tell you what, if you're, I mean, one other thing, they had to leave their rafts and parachutes and all their survival gear behind because of weight penalties. So basically, their survival gear was the clothes they had on their back, a walking stick, and a .45 automatic.
That's it.
So. But the other three made it most of the way around the globe until one of them had a problem, and his oil pressure went to zero, so he landed on the water while he still had power. He didn't dare start the engine, and unfortunately, and by the way, guys, I know a lot of you already know this, but open ocean amphibious aircraft are not really designed to land on the open ocean. They're designed to land in protected waters, lakes, rivers, bays. They have very strong limitations on the sea state. And the crew did a fine job, but they did have some damage when the plane landed. They broke a couple of the wires. Eventually, ironically, though, the plane wasn't really damaged that bad. And if I'm not mistaken, it's when they were trying to hoist it onto the ship that it went kind of like the one you had in the hangar during the earthquake. It wound up getting swinging around, bobbing on the ocean. I don't know if it hit the ship or hit the water, but then it wound up getting damaged, and it looked like they weren't going to be able to salvage it. And apparently it was the pilot of the airplane that, although it broke his heart, he gave the order to set it on fire, or to sink it. Not set it on fire, but to sink it, because it would be a hazard to ocean navigation. And they were only about a mile from shore. It started taking on. They missed it by that much. They almost saved the airplane. But
it was heartbreaking. That was that airplane was the Boston.
Yeah.
And that's why you have there were 3 airplanes that completed the trip back to Santa Monica, and it was replaced by the trainer, which became the Boston 2.
Right. So it joined them, I guess, once they got back to the United States?
I think it was Newfoundland, something like that.
Okay. So you have 4 airplanes leaving Seattle, 3 that make it most of the way around the globe.
Right.
2 of them that make all the way, with a third one joining them late in the game, so that 3 of them are there when they land, kind of a little bit of a relay race. But now here's the irony of this thing. And by the way, just to keep things in perspective, guys, in 2000, a biplane pilot and a modern steerman full of all kinds of modern equipment made the first solo biplane flight around the globe, and it still took him 6 months. So, but the and by the way, we got to give a big shout out to the Navy. They were instrumental in making this happen, even though everybody sees it as an Army endeavor. But like I said, Coolidge was not a big supporter of aviation at the time. He didn't think the air service was that important, and unfortunately, something no one, and of course this is from what I have read and seen in documentaries, but no one expected the success that they had to backfire on them politically. Apparently, although they were heroes across the globe, of course, remember this is 3 years before Lindbergh. So these guys had done something a lot of people still didn't think was even possible. But unfortunately, the massive logistics chain that they had set up, because remember, one of the reasons for the success of this, we all think of Douglas's design, and that was absolutely instrumental, but also was General Patrick and Major Martin's planning and logistics and preparation and the help of the Navy. And although in the public eye, these guys were big heroes, great thing, hoorah, wave the flag, in political financial circles, they were saying, you see how useless the airplane is? It took all of this infrastructure just for them to fly around the globe. The airplane's not a very practical thing. And it really did kind of blow up in their face that way. And it did not help the Air Corps or the Air Service with funding the way they thought it would. In fact, some people argue that it actually, I don't know why I'd say it had a detrimental effect, but it certainly didn't advance. Because I hate to say this, but the real reason behind all of this was to get funding for the Air Service, to show how viable it was. And regrettably, politically, in that aspect, it was not successful. Although it was a technical marvel. But, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. That's just what I've read from some of the books that have been written about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good take on the whole thing. It's interesting depending on the vantage point of how you look at that story. I mean, looking at it from a Douglas Aircraft Company historian standpoint, that was a benchmark, pivotal moment for the company, obviously. And I should mention, for all the Glue Troopers listening out there, if you're familiar with the Douglas logo, even up into the 1950s, there were always three airliners on it. You remember that? There was a globe, the word Douglas, and I can send some email to Max he can post it later in the week or whatever. But the Douglas logo was the word Douglas, the globe, and three airplanes. And that was their logo from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Okay, they added the rocket at the beginning of the space age, and then the three airplanes morphed into that the SST shape. And then that became McDonnell Douglas. And lo and behold, when Boeing took over or merged with the company in '97, they adapted, unquote, that Earth and that orbit and that SST shape. And I am happy to tell you, folks, that the Boeing logo, which has the circle and the orbit, is from the World Cruiser flight.
Now, I tried to expand the one I had there so they can see it a little bit. It's still not very big.
Yeah, that was the early version, and they had the globe with the three plan view silhouettes with the three lines, and that whole orbit, the Earth bit, transformed into the rocket in the 60s. But the ultimate genesis of the Boeing logo today is what you're looking at on that screen.
Now, there's an irony behind all this, Mike, that you talk about the rocket and everything, and that's because one observer, and I think he's right, he goes, this trip was the moon landing of its day.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good, I don't disagree. That's a good take. That was a Herculean effort.
I do feel compelled to point something out, though. American politicians who use this as an excuse to talk about, you see, the airplane's not practical, not only did they take the wrong lesson, they're the only ones who did. Because the European and Asian militaries that saw it were very quick to realize the implications. And years later, a Russian, I think it was a Tupolev or an Anton, that big single-engine thing that made the flight from Russia across the Arctic.
Oh, the AN-2.
AN-2.
Yeah. Antonov AN-2. They call it the Ant.
Yeah, the Ant. Make no mistake. Although it was technically just, hey, we're just doing a technical demonstration, national pride.
Yeah.
Everybody understood the underlying message. If we can fly a plane this far to come say hello, we can fly a plane this far to drop a bomb.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, I would love to see writings of military officers in the 1920s when this happened, who are in countries, from other countries who saw the planes come and go. I'm like, well, if the Americans can do this, And I'm sure there were plenty of German and Dutch and Austro-Hungarian and Russian generals that were already, concocting ideas.
Well, two quick points, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, we have a map. We have a three-dimensional global display in the museum. It's about maybe 4 or 5 feet across, and it shows the route of the flight with the stops. And we counted 62 stops. And we can talk about, it took 6 months and all this, the manpower and the Navy and everything. When you look at that globe and look at those little black dots all around the world, mostly at ports, they landed Tokyo and Bombay and in the Mediterranean, wherever they were going, it was a seaport town because that's where they had to land in the water. But when you stand there and look at that globe and realize the immensity of the distance. And by the way, those airplanes had a range of over 2,000 miles.
Mm-hmm.
In 1924, there was a single-engine biplane that could fly 2,000 miles nonstop. That's just,
It's mind-boggling.
unconscionable. I mean, it's unbelievable. So number one is you look at the map and you see the visual scope of what they accomplished, and it's mind-blowing. Number two, when the museum was created by charter with Don Douglas Jr. specifically, we wound up with all the accoutrements from the company, and we have a display case, two display cases of all the memorabilia, the awards, the accoutrement, everything that was given to the crews of those airplanes are in our museum. So we have swords from Japan, cigarette cases from the French, books, medals, just an immense amount of material, ashtrays, you name it, given to crew members from all the different countries that they visited. And I wanted to mention those two things. When you look at the map and you look at the stuff in those cases, the immensity of what they accomplished really comes home to you, really, really becomes apparent.
Well, Mike,
This sounds like Pan Am before Pan Am.
yeah, Proto-Am.
Interesting point, yeah. That's an interesting point, Steve. By the time Lindbergh was pathfinding the stuff for Pan Am, it would be the equivalent of going from like 1930s airplanes to 1950s airplanes. It was a huge leap in the technology. But yeah, you're right. It was all everything was done for the first time.
I have a question. You talk about the immensity of the plane and how it was really sort of ahead of its time, based on how early it was in aviation. Where did they get the guys with the skills?
That documentary actually gets into that. That was how the guys were selected. Every one of them had like 1,000 hours of long cross-country time, which is very rare back then.
No, but I mean the actual guys who built the plane.
That's the genius of Donald W. Douglas. God love him. I mean, the people, the level of talent that flocked to his support, the names are mind-blowing when you look at guys like Dutch Kindleberger, who went on to create North American, Larry Bell, he was involved with Glenn Martin, Jack Northrop. These were the guys, and they all had a piece of this. A lot of people don't realize Jack Northrop designed the wing for the DC-3. Actually, DC-1. But I mean, these were all, he designed the oil. We have in the museum an original drawing by Jack Northrop of the oil cooling system for the Douglas World Cruiser.
I don't think you could repeat that amount of. I mean, you think about the localized brain ability, mental. What's the word I'm looking for? The talent pool. You have all these guys that would all become legends in their own right that just happen to come work for this upstart company. It's like the band the Eagles, or the Beatles, It was just
it's like the murderer's row of aviation.
Yes, that's actually not a bad way to put it.
And to be fair, they also it was I use the word cross pollination because Douglas, Bell, and Kindleberger were working for Martin, and Northrop then went to Lockheed, and there's a lot of I don't want to say ancestry. There's a lot of crossover between the companies and the talent. But Douglas, as I say, God love him, had a knack for attracting the best talent. He took such good care of his people. A little bit of a digression. I mean, I have never talked to anyone who worked for that company in the golden age that didn't just tear up at the mention of his name.
Well,
period, end of conversation. They had such love and respect and reverence for that man. And as I said, to have shaken the hands of the people that shook his hand, that's as close as I ever got. But that was his genius, is that he had a way of attracting the best talent, and the devotion of the people who worked for him was just off the scale. And guilty of charge if I'm, head cheerleader here, but so be it. I mean,
that's what we're here for.
I have never, ever spoken to anyone that didn't say anything other than what I just shared with you.
D-Mash, it's just like hearing to that Abe Shikes.
I don't think anybody ever spoke that glowingly of Abe. But one more thing while we're still on these airplanes, and that's the Williams build. Okay, I got started today on the first one. There's 4 of them in the box. They're all identical. And I got to show you a few things about the models I think you guys will appreciate. Let me just scoot real quick here to the picture. Start off on number one. Interesting. I'm learning a lot about the airplane, obviously, by building the model. Okay, first thing, you guys will notice, and again, it's going to be about 20 or 30 seconds before you see the image, but the cockpit of the World Cruiser, and here it is being test fit, I almost thought Williams had made a mistake, but they caught it. The Cruiser had not a yoke, but a steering wheel.
Right.
It just so happens, as I learned from watching one of the articles, that the steering wheel from Martin's plane that crashed, when they went back, I think it was the 70s, and recovered the wreck, when they found out about Bob Dempster's project, they gifted him one of the steering wheels. So one of the steering wheels in the airplane is an original one.
I remember that story, yes.
And so anyway, but this kit, these are old molds, and there's a lot of flash on them, and it being 1/72 scale, a lot of really close-in fine shaving with my eyes and hands. And you'll notice that the exact same parts on every runner are the ones with the flash, so it's clearly an issue with the mold. It's not that was a one-off. So, I mean, not the end of the universe, adds a little challenge, but I managed to get them cleaned up, and painted the seats aluminum, because this is ironic. I'm going to build a model, I'm looking at pictures, but when I find the documentary on Dempster's plane, and he's got the skins removed so I can see the inside, okay, aluminum seats, wood floor, wood around the handle, and I was able to, pretty well put them together pretty easily. There are no alignment pins in the kit. The fits are pretty good, but a ton of flash that has to be sanded off. But they steel up tight even without the alignment pins. I probably won't need any putty, just a little filing. And these cabane struts and fuselage support struts and everything are a big X-shaped piece, which makes it a lot easier to put them in. Nice snug fit, but no argument. And they've got the instrument panel is correct with the different instruments, all the instruments up front for the pilot. The guy in the back seat, the Gib, has fewer instruments. It's got the big hole in the panel, which is where the steering wheel goes into. So it was. I got to give the guys at Williams credit for paying attention to detail. And we're 1/72 scale, so we're seeing this now on the screen a lot better than I could see it with my naked eye. And this was just some test fitting. I painted some seat belts on there. It does not have any pilot figures. But so far, and I don't want to jinx it, but so far it's been a pretty straightforward build. I haven't gotten into any rigging, obviously, but I'm hoping I'm going to pre-paint the wings, get the fuselage pre-painted before I go any further, and hopefully then it'll be more of just an assembly job. It turns out that these cabane struts, and I don't know what you call the lower cabane struts, and the inner wing section are actually, you'll see off to the right in this photograph, that Imperial Japanese dark green. That's actually almost a perfect color. The rest of it is a browner than normal drab, and of course the aluminum. So I may have to mix up some paint, but it's, as you were pointing out, Mike, it's more of a brown than an olive drab. But
yes, it's brown with a touch of olive drab is how I would describe it. And as far as the metal, I don't, you always have to be careful with airplanes and museums. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole with that whole thing. But the metal on the airplane that I saw had a bit of a sheen to it. Now, whether that's the way it looked in 24, I couldn't tell you. But it was a museum presentable display piece. And all the metalwork had a bit of a sheen to it. I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, it was about a 4.
Well, I've got. I went today.
It had a shine to it.
Yeah, I went today and bought yesterday to Ian's and bought some to Hurricane Hobbies and bought some gloss aluminum. So that's the color acrylic, and that's the color I'll use on the front half. I'll drab in, of course, the yellow, which is always the worst color to work with, is yellow. But that's and I think that's just the top of the horizontal and the wings. But let me see. Look at the picture.
I believe it was just the top of the top wing only, and then the horizontals.
Yeah. So, and I plan to display it with one on its wheels, one floating on floats, one up on shore on floats, and one getting the wheels and gear swap, make a little diorama out of it.
Yeah.
But
And just a footnote about the size of the airplane. I just remembered as we were talking, I mentioned Donald Douglas Jr., who eventually took over the company when the old man retired in '62. But at the time of the World flight, he had to be, I want to say maybe somewhere around 2.5, 3 years old, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a photo in the museum of him playing next to the World Cruiser main landing gear, and the tires twice as tall as he is.
Yeah. But
So,
I'm not disappointed with the Williams kit. The only thing that's quote unquote disappointing is all the flash, but they're old molds. Oh yeah, one other thing. I put the instrument decals on, and you may have noticed in some of the photographs, unfortunately, the decals broke just floating in the water. So I'm gonna probably have to use some restorer on them, and I might just go ahead and tape off and paint the rudder, the blue, white, and red, because I don't know about you guys, but I always have trouble when you get these red, white, and blue stripes that go on the tail like a World War I aircraft, or even the red and white in a World War II. There's always that big. They never want to lay down properly, and they never want to. There's always that gap on the edge of the rudder or whatever. It drives me bonkers. Getting a little OCD there. But anyway, I just wanted to. It's funny. And Mike, I think you saw the video that Rex's hangar did. In fact, when I started my other YouTube channel that just began, Pilots and Prop Wash, I was going to call it Max's hangar, but I figured it was too much like Rex's hangar. But for those who haven't seen it, Rex did a really good. He's doing a thing on the Douglas Aircraft Corporation. And Mike, I think you gave his first episode your seal of approval.
Yeah, he did his homework. I was very impressed. There was video footage I'd never seen before. He did a very nice job. A lot of good research. He had all the he nailed it. And I was very, very impressed. And thank you for sending it on to me. And by the way, the model looks really good so far. Nice build. Nice job.
Thanks. Now I just have to do it 4 times and keep my thumbs off of it.
Yeah.
The fun part's going to come with the rigging, and ironically, these airplanes actually don't have that much rigging on them for an airplane of that era. I mean, they have all the usual cross bracing and stuff, but you expect that. But I was surprised that there wasn't more, and happy there wasn't. Thing looks like it's built like a tank.
Yeah, you mentioned. I'm sorry. You mentioned the 4 different airplanes. It reminds me of a wonderful story. The great Douglas artist R.G. Smith, whose work I'm sure everybody will be familiar with, made an honorary Blue Angel. They flew him in a Skyhawk. I mean, he was quite the celeb around the company and a genius. One of the greatest artists of that time period of our generation. But he always said, he loved the Blue Angels. He loved painting them. There was just one little problem. Whenever he did a picture of the formation, he had to write every single thing 6 times.
Well, it's funny.
U.S. Navy, Blue Angels, Douglas Skyhawk, the number, 6 times he had to do all it.
Got a little tedious. It's funny you should mention that, the Blue Angels, because the next thing I was going to bring up was this article that was sent to me by Hans Peter in Denmark. And folks had asked about this. This is out of the 1983 issue of the Airfix magazine. And what this guy is doing is no one made... now, Mike, you might be familiar with the F2G Corsair, with the big engine and the bubble canopy, the Super Corsair.
Right.
Well, no one made a kit of one. Back in the 80s, he decided to make one. So he does this article on how to convert your Corsair to be a regular Corsair to be a F2G, how to cut everything down, and he goes into detail about it. And I was reading about this, and they said, of course, the airplane, they only built like 10 or 12 of them. They never went into operation. Only 2 of them exist. One of them still flies. It was a racing plane. A couple of them were lost racing. At least one of them, I think, anyway. But the reason I find it interesting that you brought that up is because when I was doing a little quick research on it, and yes, that is a converted regular Corsair. That is not an F2 kit model. That's a F4U1 that he converted. And he had to extend the cowling, get a 4-bladed prop. He's using a P51 canopy. Had to shave down and milliput the fuselage, increase the tail. A lot of work. But it paid off with a nice model. But here's the thing. When I got curious, so I started doing research. I didn't realize this. Now, all you aviation buffs out there, this you're going to know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to give just a quick background. The Corsair, the famous bent wing airplane, the thing we're doing a build on right now, we're doing our P-38 and Corsair group build. Well, the Corsair, of course, was kind of the bee's knees for a single-engine Navy fighter in World War II. Everybody, a lot of air forces kept using them after the war, including our Navy used them well through the Korean War. There was a replacement aircraft, the Grumman Bearcat. Now, most people know the Bearcat now probably because of Rare Bear, the last Bearcat racing. I always assumed, because the Bearcat, everybody talked about what a hot airplane it was, that it was better than the Corsair in all regards, but it was not. It was actually slower than the Corsair. The Corsair was a little bit faster. And they said the Bearcat could outturn it, outclimb it, but it couldn't outrun it. And but the Bearcat, and I didn't think to get a picture of this. The first you were talking about, the reason I bring this, you're talking about the Blue Angels. The Blue Angels' first airplane was a conventional Grumman Hellcat. Then very quickly, after 2 years or so, they went to the Bearcat and used it for a long time. But the operational Navy got rid of it after only about 6 years. But they kept all the old Corsairs. And they kept the Corsair up to, God, I think the Marines got rid of the last one in 55 or something. It was just one of those things. As you brought up the Blue Angels, and I was just thinking, the Corsair never got to be a Blue Angel, but the Bearcat did. But the Corsair stayed in inventory after we'd given the Bearcats to the French.
There's an angle to that, and it's very similar with the Thunderbirds. The Corsairs were so valuable, they didn't want to give them up to the team.
Yeah, I can believe that.
There were a number of times where the Thunderbirds and the Blues wound up with, the F-11F Tiger, what I always call the other airplane. There's the airplane, and then there's the other airplane. And so, look at the engines. I mean, the Super Corsair had the 4360 in it, right?
The big one.
Yeah, and the Bearcats, Pratt & Whitney R2800. So you're looking at, probably 1,000 horsepower difference somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
An appreciable increase in horsepower with the Corsair. But the Bearcat just was a better air show airplane, very similar to the 105 in the Thunderbird's history. It had a very short 6-month life with a very unfortunate accident, but it just wasn't an airplane suited for the team. And so when you look at the long-term airplanes, the Panthers, Cougars, the Tiger had a very long run with the Blues. The F-100 in the Thunderbirds, very, huge amount of time with the team. And the T-38, the F-4, the A-4 Skyhawk. These were airplanes that were beautifully suited for the air show role. So it wasn't, and many, of course they had the Phantom. That's a whole nother, we could do a whole session on that.
Yeah.
But it's not always the biggest and loudest and everything else. It's the airplanes that look prettiest doing the routines of the team.
Well, I imagine the team, what they needed was something that was nimble. And there's no question the Bearcat was more nimble than the Corsair. Just like the T-38 is an extremely nimble airplane and relatively cheap to operate. But I just found that interesting. You'd mentioned the Blue Angels, and I was thinking, hey, well, funny you should happen to mention that. But Hans Peter, I want to thank him for sending those pictures, digging up. That was a 1983 Airfix magazine, and you could probably find an F2 model now. But that was a pretty nice little kit bash, and that's what I consider. You call it modification, but I consider it a kit bash. But speaking of kit bashes and things like that, we're kind of shifting gears here, but one of the glue troopers sent me a picture of this Ford LTD station wagon and goes, I remember growing up in cars like this. How come nobody makes these models? And Steve was
I remember growing up in cars like that.
Yeah, it's very possible some of us were made in cars like that. But anyway, I digress. Steve's belief is no one would buy a model of that car. My belief is maybe not when we were kids, but now that we're grown-ups and we all look back at those cars nostalgically, we actually might. So
they'd buy it if it was the family truckster.
Which is, by the way, something else they should be making a kit of.
What's missing in that photo is the wood paneling, right?
I know! Yeah. That was a fact. We used to, when I was a kid, we called them beaver cars.
Yeah, the fake wood, the fake authentic original fake wood paneling. That
This
I
is-
was, in our neighborhood, I still remember my friend Richard's dad brought one home. Maybe this touches a nerve. When you were a kid and someone would bring home, quote, the new car. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, the house next door, I'd be standing in the driveway, and here comes Dad in the new car.
It was a
And
neighborhood
my friend-
event.
Yeah, my friend Richard's dad brought home a lime green metallic with wood paneling Ford Country Squire wagon, 1958.
My mom had a brown Catalina like that, a blue Country
go.
Squire, and we had a green one at one point, and it might have been a Country Squire.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was lime green.
It was the routine was every Sunday night. Probably 20 kids from the apartment house would pile into that car. We'd go get ice cream and then come back and watch Wonderful World of Disney and the Ed Sullivan Show. That was like a ritual on Sunday nights.
Absolutely.
Richard's dad's station wagon, and the first guy to call tail gunner sat at the back window.
Okay.
There you go.
Tell me if this rings a bell. You're at a friend's house at that kind of party, that kind of a birthday or somewhere where there's 12 kids, right? Everybody piles in the station wagon. Mom starts taking the kids around town, dropping everybody off at their house. You didn't want to be the first one. You always want to be the last one because the party was still
my
going.
God.
But when it got to your house, you're like, I don't want to get out yet.
Yeah. Now, if I may, there's another angle with the station wagon. I was in all the school bands as a kid, and I wound up in a couple of rock groups in high school and stuff. And the rule was that the leader of the band in junior high and high school was the kid whose mom had the station wagon to carry all the stuff.
Yep. I knew that's where you were going to go with that. The way I saw
there
it
were two or
was...
three that I don't remember the cars, but I remember there was like my friend Don, my friend Roger. They were the ones whose mom and dad had the station wagon. They were the leader of the band.
They called the gig, baby.
It was their band, yeah. And we'd drive up to the Catskill Mountains and do gigs and stuff, and it was just this is what's so beautiful about your channel, Max, is at the time we didn't even think about it. It was like, oh yeah, that's what we're doing. And we look back now, all these decades later, and go, are you kidding me?
See, Max, Mike just admitted that he was in Dirty Dancing.
Well, that would be, you know what? Yeah, no guests were allowed in the bungalows. Yeah, right.
One thing I remember, seeing the local rock band.
Summer of '64. I'll send you some classified photos.
Okay.
Summer of '64, we did summer in the Catskills. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, what I remember was first time I saw a rock band show up in a station wagon, and you're gonna think I'm making this up, but the thought going through my mind was, wow, even a rock band cannot make a station wagon look cool.
All right, so this may be a little off topic, but you know what we graduated to from the station wagon? You ready?
Let me guess. VW bus.
That was VW wagon. What do they call it? The bus.
Yeah, the VW bus. Yep.
Yeah. The bus. Okay, I thought you said bug. I'm sorry. And then the vehicle we took to the Catskills for that gig was a Chevy Greenbrier van. And it actually ran. I mean, it got us there and back. So but those were the days. But back to the point of building a model, and in terms of nostalgia, if I ever found a model of Richard's dad's green with wood paneling Ford Country Squire, I'd probably buy it.
Wouldn't we all?
It run.
Okay, I'm trying to find a picture real quick from the. Yes, here it is. Here. Okay. You guys just, like it or not, you're getting a story. Okay. This picture that you're about to see here in 10 or 20 seconds, Steve already knows this. Okay. And I used it in my video the other day. So my last trip, my last 3-day was just a train wreck. The first flight went 5 hours late. I got to the hotel at 4 in the morning. Didn't even fly the second day. They deadhead me to New York, although it was a beautiful day in Boston to be out on the Commons. So they stick me in this hotel. I'm going in and out of Kennedy, but the hotel is right beside LaGuardia. Anyway, point is, their restaurant and check-ins on the 12th floor. I look out the window the next morning, and there's this VW bus sitting. I'm like, hello? I think somebody got lost looking at the wrong off-ramp. And they use it as a DJ station, obviously. But we all remember when these things were everywhere. They were the cheapest kind of vehicle like that you could buy. And I swear, I bet half of the music bands, rock bands in America were driving around in these things. All the hippies loved them.
I agree 100%. You know what I remember about that is the steering wheel. The reason they call it a VW bus, the steering wheel was horizontal, like a bus.
I remember that. Yep. Oh, I spent my time.
Just think of how safe it was that in an accident your legs were before the front wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's, And what was the engine, like 85 horsepower, 65 horsepower?
When it wasn't spitting valves. Those things were notorious for breaking down.
My son lives in San Diego, and he constantly sends me pictures because I think all of them are in San Diego.
You know, Fluffy Guy, Gabriel Iglesias, the comedian, is a huge collector of those
He's got a whole collection of them.
And he went on Jay Leno's garage, and they went around riding around him one, and it broke down on him. Those things are notorious for breaking down. And look, I'm not sure that's not why I don't subconsciously occasionally knock mine off the shelf. The beauty of a snap tight.
That's cosmic. I mean, if you were going uphill, we'd draw straws to see who had to get out.
Yeah. First time I rode in a VW Beetle, Skip Maryland, our buddy Skip Maryland was driving me home, and we're going up a pretty steep hill in Tallahassee. And I remember he's got it on the floor, and I'm like, I literally looked at, are we going to make it? I was starting to think he was going to make me get out and walk up the hill. But,
Or help push.
Oh, yeah. But, it's funny. They were just old cars to us back then. And when I got rid of my 86 Honda Civic, after having it for 9 years and beating the living snot out of it, except for going through clutches, it kept on going. But when I got rid of it, I got rid of it like $300. And I was like, 86 Honda Civic's never going to be a classic. Well, guess what? Speaking of classics and shifting gears completely, just to swerve into another lane, I stumbled on another one of those magnificent Pathé history things that are getting all over YouTube now. And I swear to God, if there's one thing the British do better than anybody else, it's state-run, interesting little 3-minute documentaries, right? And the actor Peter Cushing, who we all, Grand Moff Tarkin, apparently was an avid modeler, mostly of military miniature figures. And they have this 3-minute video of him in his home with this very well-equipped. And those are all resource books behind him. And he's got huge layouts up on the floor. I didn't realize this, but apparently, long before any of us got into, today, the Warhammer and all the online gaming with pieces and everything, apparently that was a thing back in the 50s and 60s. Even Napoleon did it. They basically today what we would consider online gaming, you had to be there. And it was popular with men and women, and you had women making all the military miniatures, and it was quite the thing in England and back in the day. And I just thought that was an interesting, little tidbit. But I can't paint a figure to save my life. I mean, it's all I can do to paint a pilot figure, and he's wrapped up in a flight suit and basically one color with, an oxygen mask on. And I see them doing this magnificent work. And God, I go to these model shows, and some of the figures I see painted, I'm like, I don't know how people do that. And then my wife does it when she does the dolls. She's put some faces on some of my characters. It's Ken.
It's Captain Ken?
Hang on, guys. We're in for a story. Let's see. Merge active call. Ken? Ken?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Steve and Mike Michette are both online. So.
Hey, Steve. Hi, Mike. Hi, Ken.
So, Ken, what's this I hear you were stranded at sea with no motor in your dinghy?
I got oars.
You've got oars. At 300 yards is further than it looks, isn't it?
Oh, I got my exercise today. I didn't know you were a Viking.
Mike, just to bring it up to speed.
Use oars. They use sail.
Mike, just to bring you up to speed, my friend Ken just very recently bought how big a sailboat? 39-footer? 42?
39. Well, technically it's 38 and a half.
Okay. And unfortunately, Florida has got so blasted. What? Hey, guys, we got 157 watching. I think that's a record.
Yes, it is.
Wow. So anyway, thanks everybody. So anyway, Florida. If there's one thing Florida has, we got plenty of land. You can build anywhere. What we don't have are boat slips. Although Florida is basically one big coastline, it's pretty much covered in sailboats. And Ken couldn't find a slip that his boat would fit in. So he has to dinghy in and out. But Ken doesn't have a motor on his dinghy. He has oars.
Well, that's about to change. The reason I'm late is because I went over to Cabela's and they bought a trolling motor.
There you go.
Did you get ammo too while you were there?
It's Cabela's.
I
It's
looked
the
at
law.
it. The prices were okay, but that's okay.
Well, Paul said it was just over. We actually had 166 people on for a while there. I guess I bored enough of them to leave, but the hardcore here, the ones that matter.
They have a big thing here in Delaware. There's a Cabela's up at the Christiana Mall, which is right off 95 in Wilmington.
Mm-hmm.
And they're missing 500,000 rounds of ammo.
Don't look in my closet. And by the way, Mike, if any of those World Cruiser artifacts ever go missing, they're not here.
We'll have a fun visit. There's a lot to show you. And let me ask, do you need me to sign off? Is there too many guys on the
Mike,
board here?
you can go whatever you feel like doing. I mean, the fun. I can handle the four of us without any trouble, but I don't want to hold John unless you want to be here. I mean, this is a voluntary thing.
Okay, no, I just didn't know if it was too many guys on the party line, as they used to call it. But
we're technological wizards. We can handle anything.
Speaking of technology,
just the switchboard. That's awesome.
Just to completely derail everything, this has nothing to do with models. This is just something I stumbled onto. I thought was cool. I found a picture of Scotty, Jimmy Doohan, as a young officer in the Canadian Army, and of course you can recognize. We get the picture in about 5 or 10 seconds, but it's very well known that Scotty, Jimmy Doohan, was missing a finger. All the hardcore Star Trek fans know that. This is a screen grab from a documentary on him, but I found out how he lost his finger, and I knew it was
stuck in the transporter.
Yeah, really. Somewhere out in space, it's still in a loop. No, he was a corporal in an artillery unit, and he was. This is, of course, after the landing of Normandy. And he was heading back towards their lines after, I don't know, it was a recon patrol or what, but apparently some jumpy fellow soldier didn't recognize him, thought he was German, and opened up on him, hit him 4 times in the shoulder, 4 times in the leg, once in the shoulder, and hit his finger. And the doctor had to remove the finger. And I was thinking, wait a minute, if the guy rattled off 6 rounds that fast and didn't kill him, it must have been a Sten gun or something, But
he was Canadian.
Yeah, but anyway, he later on, I believe, became an officer and a pilot when he was flying observation aircraft, artillery spotting. But apparently, he was quite the rough and tough soldier, and at one point had the temporary title of the craziest pilot in the Canadian Army because he would. As a rumor has it, he would go down, and when he ran out of marking rockets and stuff, just go down and swoop the Germans to show them where to shoot. Which is saying something, flying a Cub or an Auster or some 70-mile-an-hour, fabric airplane. But so Scotty was badass. Anyway, I just thought I would throw that out there real quick. I thought that was a cute thing. Because I know a lot of us here are big Jimmy Doohan fans and we like Star Trek and stuff. But now there's an interesting character for you to paint.
He was a pilot in the Canadian Air Force during World War II?
Army. But he was he was an enlisted man. Ironically, I think it was after he got shot up, he got more training and came back, I believe, as a liaison pilot. It was a much shorter training program because you were basically just learning to fly a Piper Cub.
Tom Fox said, Stormtrooper School of Marksmanship.
Yeah, really, the Stormtrooper School of Marksmanship. Now, there's only one more thing I have before we go into our usual free-for-all. I think it was.
Buckle up, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe it was Dr. Smolik sent this to me. He has an AI program on his computer, and he put in Godzilla and Batman, and this is what the AI generated. And I think some of this stuff is wicked cool. You'll see it here in just a second. But, I mean, basically, he put a computer on an acid trip. This would make, some of these would make it pretty odd for all the kaiju fans to make a really awesome kit bash. But I was like, that's sad when AI just comes up with something. I mean, that's actually pretty cool. But when AI is coming up with better stuff than Hollywood.
Who says you need production designers?
There you go. Whoops.
Oh, that one's interesting with the horns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are supposed to
Those
be
are
bat ears.
Ken. They're not horns. Come on.
Zalula.
You make it demonic.
Anyway, I just thought you guys would get a tickle out of that. That's pretty cool. But
I can see the guys in round 2 watching this calling Toho right now.
hey, we got an idea.
Need a license.
Now
Or maybe we should try something, see what we
the
can
question
come up
is, do you call it Batzilla or Gotman? I mean, personally, I think the I don't know. There's something terribly right and terribly wrong about that all at the same time. I think that's my
Can Max
favorite.
ever do a stream without a Godzilla reference?
Well,
Heck
you know,
No.
it's like Mike doing one without a box art. You know, it's just not going to happen. So getting back to models and airplanes, though, one thing I thought I would point out was that Douglas' first successful airplane, you know, in serial production, was the DT-2, if I'm not mistaken, which was the early torpedo plane.
Ooh.
What?
Before you move on, Jay said, do an AI and Max, Ken, and Steve and see what comes up.
Oh man, that just ain't right. What you're going to get is an Uber nerd.
I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah, I second that motion.
The world's not ready for that.
No.
No.
But Mike, still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. The DT-2. This is the first thing that the first serial production airplane for Douglas, correct?
Well, the DT-1 was a single cockpit airplane. The DT-2 added a second crewman and had an internal radiator. That was the big difference. But first I'd say first long-term production airplane for the Navy would be that airplane. Yes.
Well, what I'm thinking is that I scoured ScaleMates. I couldn't find a kit model of the airplane, and I'm the first one to admit that outside of racing aircraft, the interwar aircraft are pretty poorly represented. And I thought it's kind of interesting because this airplane, it's actually pretty significant in a lot of ways, not in and of itself, but what it led to. And given all the obscura that's being made by companies looking for something new and fresh, it just seems like they kind of missed a little low-hanging fruit here. But I don't think this airplane also, like the World Cruisers, it could be on floats or on wheels by design. In fact, you can see a lot of the World Cruiser DNA in there. I don't know. It just seems to me like they missed an opportunity there. And that's not too late. Someone could crank it out.
Yeah, an interesting little side note on the photo that you have up on the screen right now. You notice under the right wingtip, there's a device that is attached to the struts that looks like a spear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a little triangular
Yeah.
situation going on in the front.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of, if not the very first data booms for flight test.
Ah.
So they put it out there to get clean air, and that's where they get calibrated airspeed and slip and yaw indications and all that sort of stuff. Today you see it on the front of every experimental jet, or mainly I take that back. In the 50s and 60s, you'd see these long nose probes on the fronts of the jets, and that was a modern version of what that is. But that's one of the very first air data collection devices ever used, and that again is on a Douglas airplane.
Now, see, I thought that was when they went up in the Arctic to go fishing.
Yeah, well.
Well, it's funny you mentioned. What are you giggling at, Ken?
JH just said Aurora would have made a great model of the Ken, Max, and Steve composite.
Oh God, they're just not letting me. Yeah, they made a movie about it called The Green Slime. If you guys look just above my thumb here, I'm pointing at this book that I was carrying on the road with me for light reading, and it was about concept aircraft. I got it from was a Specialty Press, and it's of course a history of a lot of aircraft that were developed, but a lot of them that were proposed that weren't developed. A kit model company needs to buy a copy of this book because there are so many cool airplanes in there they could make that were proposals or ideas that never got made. But look, we've made just about everything. It's time to start making this stuff. We've made models of some things like the Rapier and some others that didn't go into production. We've made ones of stuff that we did make that we shouldn't have, like the Beaumark. So I'm just thinking, that there's a lot of opportunity out there for a manufacturer. And there's probably no rights on any of this stuff, so they wouldn't have to worry about Lockheed or Grumman coming and demanding money from them.
Lance Ravel said Max's head on a Godzilla body.
Okay, that ain't right.
Don't we have that already?
It's funny you should mention that because that Polar Lights Godzilla I have in the shed, I'm planning to cut it in half and put Monica's going to make Naruna Nakajima the doll, and I'm going to make the Godzilla half, and we're going to put him in there and make a mock-up of the set and make a diorama of the movie set where they filmed it. I would warn model builders, or I would tell model builders, if you ever have a diorama that you make and it's not, and you think something about it's wrong or it's not right, just put a movie crew on the edge of it, and now everything's fixed.
Oh. Nice.
That's one of the problems with being people like us who are history buffs and all this other stuff is that we go to watch movies and that ain't right, that wrong helmet, wrong. Why is the German carrying an infield? And pilots are the worst of the lot. That's not. Oh my God! It's the SC-5 didn't have swept wings. That's just a dressed up tiger moth.
I think I may have killed your live stream. I cut out as 157. It's now down to 117.
Thanks for that mental imagery, guys.
Sorry about that.
But
right now, Mike's thinking, I could be sitting out on the patio instead of, listening to this.
Oh, by the way, Mike, did I hear something about Specialty Press is going to be shutting down, or?
Funny you should ask. Yes, that is correct. The CEO of Specialty Press is a gentleman that I've had the pleasure and honor of working with for past almost 20 years now. And he is a pilot, a car enthusiast, a wonderful, wonderful guy, real true believer, honorary glue trooper, I'm sure. And he is choosing to move on, retire. That's my house line. Don't worry about that. Sorry. He has the Car Tech company, which is the car books, and that will continue on. Specialty Press was an adjunct of Car Tech, and so Specialty is suspending production. Their last orders will be taken on September 15th, and they will move on into history. It's been a great association, and shameless plug, I'm the editor of that cargo concept book you talked about a couple minutes ago, and worked with the guys that wrote that. And I, shameless plug number 2, I did the comp for the cover.
Oh, that's your artwork? I did not know.
It's a digital artwork. It's a digital artwork from my design, yes.
Oh, great. Well, guys, if you want to get it, it's a cool book. You better get it here soon because that's only, a month and 3 days left.
Yes, it's a month, and the good news is that all the books, I believe, are on sale off the website at 50% discount.
I bought too soon. But I've got some of their books. They're great. They're the only place you're going to find those kind of books, and some really cool stuff. And there's also, I look in there and I'm like, I wonder what models I could kit bash to make those out of. But God, I look at some of the kit bashes people do, and they're better than a lot of the stuff that's manufactured. I'm like, I am not worthy. Of course, the main thing is that you just have a good time, you enjoy yourself. That's what really matters. But I'm not sure what my first kit bash was. I think I converted a MiG-21 into a spaceship. But Russian equipment is a natural for kit bashing because working Russian equipment looks like a kit bash.
That's very true.
Maybe that Star Trek one Enterprise you did, maybe it's not so far off from what it would actually look like.
I tell you what, I look at some of the German stuff also, and I'm kind of like, were you guys deliberately going for the bug-eyed, ugly look, or what is your fascination with these insect-eyed airplanes, the Ju-88 and the Heinkel and everything? I'm like, they take that Art Deco to an extreme. But if you guys ever saw, was it Dale Stevens that did the original Rocketeer graphic novels? Sorry for the air quotes there, but to me they're still comic books. But the aircraft in there, I mean, everything was very. I think that's one of the reasons. The Rocketeer is one of my favorite movies, and there's an innocence to it. Good guys, bad guys, and Jennifer Connelly. But
in that order.
Not necessarily in that order.
But but I watched that movie, and it has that 1930 serial. If you guys are Voyager fans, it's very Captain Proton. It has that look, and I think Billy Campbell was perfect to play off Cliff Secord, just the all-American, kid, all-American pilot, very, Charles Lindbergh sort of vibe and everything, and just I don't know. There's just the feel of the movie that I really, really enjoyed. I love the music. Was Horner did the music for it. It's one of my favorite theme songs, and it's. But I also have a thing for the Art Deco look, which ironically, when I was a kid, I didn't like it. My grandmother had like a '56 Bel Air, and I thought it was the ugliest car on earth, and now I absolutely love those old designs. And I guess it's a thing that just comes about his age. But, when I was a kid, if a '66 Corvette went down the road, I was like, now there's a hot-looking ride, But, I don't know. You guys tell me about... What?
I just sent you an email about a kit bash I think the viewers would be interested in seeing.
Okay, let me see if I can get that open. But real quick, guys, anybody, this is up, Mike, Steve, Ken, doesn't matter who. Tell me about something that when you were young, a car or a plane or something like that you thought was ugly that now you think is, hey, that's really cool.
58 Edsel.
Really?
Okay, I'll give you that.
My dad had one.
Well, let me amend that. The Edsel, for whatever reason, it got such a bad rap. To this day, it's kind of like the Bell X2. You look at it and go, it's actually pretty cool. But it just historically got a very bad rap for being unsuccessful, whatever. That's a whole other thing.
Well,
but when the 58 Edsel came out, a neighbor, like I said earlier, had brought home the new car, and I think it was pale blue with dark blue inserts or something. I don't know, but I thought it was cool. And then I start reading about, it's a failure, the death knell for the Ford Motor Company, and then here we are today, where it's an iconic collectible. So I kind of have to correct myself. I didn't think it was that ugly at the beginning. I thought it was kind of neat. Well, and then it was like, I guess this isn't. Oh, all right. Well, I guess it didn't work. And then you come back and go, it was pretty neat,
Well, there were two reasons why it failed.
Okay.
They introduced it in 1958, where America went into a recession.
We did have a recession that year.
And it wasn't exactly low priced. It was between the Mercury. It was between the Mercury and the Lincoln. And the other reason was that quality was absolutely horrible.
Well, that'll do it.
I mean, my dad's friend had one. He bought one for his wife. It was really nice. It was light yellow, and it had white, inserts in the side. And she had about 2 weeks, and she was driving down the road, made a turn, the left wheel fell off. I mean, the whole suspension part came off, not like just the tire.
That'll ruin your day. Yeah.
And then they had that Teletouch transmission with the buttons in the middle of the
That
steering wheel.
was a little ahead of
I
its
thought that
time.
was so cool.
I
That
was
was
going to ask about that. Yes, I remember the buttons. Yep.
That was incredibly cool when the guys at the factory hooked the wires up to the right button. Because there was a lot of that went on.
Oh, no.
You know, somebody would put it in drive and the car would bash through the garage door. You know, a lot of that went on.
Not
And-
to be insensitive, do you think that was accidental or not?
No, I just think it was you know.
They were making a statement.
No, I just think that it was just poor workmanship. I mean, I think that the colors of the wires and, you know, they didn't pay attention and, you know.
Probably you guys weren't getting paid enough.
Yeah, well,
No,
you know, I mean,
that'll
it's
do it.
it's an extremely collectible car today.
Right.
You know, when you go to car shows, you see a few of them, not a lot of them, but they were quite the car. You know, I mean, they spent a phenomenal amount of money on market research, and that was another one of the reasons why it was a big drain on Ford's, you know, bottom line, because they spent a lot of money to bring that car to the market.
Well,
And they
Steve,
just,
In terms of collectability, we have a triannual, 3 times a year model show out in near Knott's Berry Farm in Disneyland out in Wayne Park, California, and it's been going since the mid '70s. And I mention this because it's like Oshkosh to what Oshkosh is to airplanes. This is to the model kit collecting thing. Max, if you can ever arrange a trip out here sometime, it'll blow your mind. But I mention this because one of the main vendors of that show would bring all his kits to the show. Are you ready? In a '59 Edsel station wagon.
a Bermuda station wagon.
Yeah.
Oh, my
pink
God.
With dark pink.
And it has those weird looking taillights that look like
Yes.
beads.
Yes, all the above. Yep. And it was people would go out to the parking lot when this guy would roll in. It was that kind of thing. So that's why I mentioned it.
You know who has one of those? Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart has one of
Martha
those.
Stewart. I remember she
Okay.
had some kind of vintage wagon, yeah.
Oh my God.
The Edsel Villager.
Wow.
I mean, it was quite the car, but
It was.
was just an expensive failure.
I wonder if I can make a model of
Things
that.
turn out.
Well, Steve,
Ford
I'm
thought it
showing.
was such a great car that he named it after his son.
I thought Edsel was the one that started it.
No, Henry Ford II named it after his father.
Oh.
Oh, his father. I thought it was his son.
Well, that was the son of Henry Ford, but Henry
Oh.
Ford II was his son.
Oh, okay.
I just can't believe he actually named his son Edsel.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I
don't
guess
know where
back
that
then.
came from, but okay.
I'm putting up a
there
picture
were-
of the. I'm putting up a picture of the Edsel
made-
wagon that I just found, and it actually looks like a fairly conventional car.
They made 2,235 of them
The
That
wagon.
was it? That was it?
of the wagon.
Oh, the
14
wagon.
Of the wagon, 1,456 of them were 6-passenger models. 779 were 9-passenger models.
And
Wow.
I'm remembering, if I remember correctly, it was a 2-door, right?
No,
Well, that's a 4-door.
They had a 2 and a 4.
Okay.
Huh.
Huh.
Well, Steve,
I
mean,
didn't know they made a wagon.
Yeah, it was quite the car.
I don't think I
It
understand
was.
the idea behind a 2-door wagon, but okay.
It's not that much cheaper than a 4-door wagon, believe it or not.
Well, Steve, I'm rolling those pictures you sent me of this kit bash. You got any story on that?
Yeah, Jim Keeler, Mr. Car Modeler,
Mm-hmm.
car
Dumbass.
excellence. I was talking to him the other day, and he says, I started working on this statement that I made from a Plymouth Prowler AMT kit. Now, what he did was he took the trunk of the Plymouth Prowler,
Uh-huh.
cut it off, and reversed it, and used that for the back portion where the 2 seats are in the back.
Okay.
And he built in the fenders, which you can see in the back with putty. And he did some work on the nose. He's putting a Chrysler Hemi in it. He's kind of debating whether he should have a blower sticking out of the hood or not.
Of course you do.
And he's making the interior from scratch, as you can see from some of the interior panels. And I can't wait to see what this thing is going to look like when it's done. He's told me he's going to paint it yellow. But I can't wait to see. But this is, he just cobbled this together one afternoon.
Like you do.
Yeah.
Is that a Panther?
No, that was a Plymouth Prowler.
Prowler.
Yeah. And he cut the back section off, which was where the trunk was, and flipped that piece around to make the back part where the two rear seats are. Then made a floors, making the interior panels, and put a Hemi engine in it, which should have been in it from the beginning. And he's putting a 40 Ford grill in the front.
Yeah.
I mean,
Leave it
this
to
thing,
Jim.
when it's finished, it's going to be, Jim he's like a one in a million. He makes stuff that's just amazing.
It does. Does Jim paint or does he just model?
No, he paints them too.
No, I mean like paint pictures, like Mike does, like as an
No.
artist. Okay.
No, he just models.
He just has his artistic flair. I thought it might be the kind of thing because
he's really good at fabrication. I mean, he's working on he's just waiting for the decals. He built a replica of Craig Breedlove's Sonic 1, the Spirit of America.
I remember seeing the
blue
pictures.
car.
Yeah, right.
He carved it out of a piece of wood. He made the front scoop out of dental-like plastic.
Oh, man.
When you look in the scoop, you can see the turbine blades of the engine, and he built the rear afterburners and the rear exhaust, and painted it. And he's just having somebody make the decals. And once the decals are made, it's done. I mean, I got a picture of that I could send you too.
Yeah.
He is just, he's like amazing. He's like a legend in as you know, in the hobby industry.
Oh yeah, but he's also designed models that are in production. I mean, Keeler's been in it since the '60s though, so he's been in the industry in one capacity or another.
I mean, he worked for Revell. He was in charge of product development when he was like 18 years old.
Well, one of the reasons I asked about that was like Tom Daniel, who designed kit cars and builds everything. But TD also did box art and was a painter, and he actually left the model industry when things kind of went soft in the late 60s and 70s, early to mid 70s. He tried to survive as an artist, and he started doing a lot of art, Tom Daniel art, and he said it was some of the leanest years of his life, though, because the whole industry was... Oh, Mike, by the way, guys, just for the record, we covered everything I had material-wise. I mainly wanted to talk about these Williams Brothers kits and the Douglas World Cruisers. So the Max's Models live stream, as far as models concerned, is kind of pretty much officially over now. We're going to go into just our regular post-show gab session, where we can talk about anything and everything, movies, models, art, airplanes, anything you like. And I wanted to ask Mike a question, which is as the opening question of our after show. We've actually, in Kit Models, we've actually talked about how the economy has affected models, how after the 73 oil crisis, the kit model industry never really recovered completely. And that brought up a question. You've made a good chunk of your professional life working as an artist that had to keep a book, as you say. And I'm wondering how, over the various times since you left Douglas, you've had like your good years, your bad years, and how the economy has affected the art community and just, getting work and selling stuff.
That's a heavy duty question. I'll be happy to answer it, and it's right on target. When I was employed by the Douglas Aircraft Company division of McDonnell Douglas, but I worked for Douglas. The thought of setting out on my own and having my own business was as abstract as walking on the moon or something. I mean, I had a secure corporate job. I had at that time tons of benefits. Everything was taken care of. I was making good money. I was in my dream. This is the job I dreamed of my entire life. I was newly married. I had a young daughter. I mean, it was a great great time. And then the company, I'll put it politely and briefly, the company went away, okay? It disappeared in the late 80s, and Boeing got it in 97. So I set out on my own, took a leap of faith, and started my own business as a freelance, not only artist, a freelance aviation artist, which is unique. You know, my brother-in-law would always ask, you know, what was my ranking in my field? Where was I in my field? And I'd say, well, Lloyd, I'm in the top 10. Wow, that's really impressive. Top 10. Wow, that's great. And then we get together, you know, a couple months later. What's your ranking now, Mike? Where are you now? I said, I'm in the top 10. Finally, after about a year, he goes, Mike, how many people do what you do? I said, Lloyd, 10.
Yeah.
That's it. My point being that it was a very small community. We were brothers. We were best of friends and competitive. We would compete for contracts and projects, and somebody would get it, and, you know, we'd all cheer. I mean, it was an amazing fraternity. But my point is that the first torpedo, first chink in the armor, was the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989.
Okay.
And the end of the Cold War. And what that did to the defense industry, for those of us who partook of, you know, defense contracts to make pictures of machinery and airplanes that they were building, that was the first. That really was the first torpedo. Then you add in 9/11, which took care of the commercial aviation industry. I had been contracted to Douglas. I had been contracted to Airbus. My friend Craig Cadera did projects for Airbus. We were all thriving in the commercial world with artwork. And what 9/11 did to the commercial aviation industry, and Max, you know this from your vantage point, it never really recovered. And then the perfect storm, final of the three major factors, was the digital age, the invasion of the advent of digital art. And so be it. I mean, I make my YouTube channel on digital. I am totally digital today. I no longer paint with natural media. I get it. The world has moved on. No argument. But, you know, that book cover that you've got over your shoulder there, that cargo, that's a Fairchild proposal with the canard thing. And I drew a sketch, scanned it into Photoshop, developed it into a comp, and then it was done professionally. The cover you see there, the final art, was done by a digital artist. And the difference is it was all emailed, and it was done in about like a day and a half to 2 days versus 2 weeks, and sent by FedEx. So I totally get it. One of my friends said the coolest thing about digital art, you never have to wait for it to dry.
Well, this beautiful...
And so point is there were some very thin times, and I had some amazingly odd jobs to fill in those times. I'll admit it. I sold cars. I worked in a frame shop. I did whatever had to be done to put bread on the table. And then somehow things rallied, and I wound up in the book business, in the magazine business, whatever it took. So, long-winded answer to your question. I apologize.
No,
but
that's
it was
fine.
a roller coaster ride. I knew it when I got into the game. Anyone in this business has been through it. And the fact that we can share these stories today on your fabulous channel and share it with friends is really a joy.
Well, I appreciate that. This just above your book, the artwork of me and the Red Baron going out of the TARDIS at Matthew Teven at Matt Line, 1967. If you guys want to contact him, he will take contracts. Shameless plug, a match out there. So anyway, I believe that was digital art, and but Mike, digital art still takes talent. I mean, you don't have, like you say, you don't have to wait to paint dry, but you still have to. My computer that I'm doing this on right now has this electronic stylus. It's actually a computer that was made for doing artwork for artists. I got it because it was also good for live streams and stuff. And so once in a while I'll take a picture and use this pen to outline it to get rid of material to make the green screen if I want to chroma key. Like this T-shirt. This is done against a blue background so I could chroma key it. But my sister, I think it was my sister-in-law, did this shirt for me. But the point I'm getting at is that I don't actually use it to do any art or pictures because I don't have the talent. And so even though it may be digital, it still takes an artist. Just traded your pen for a brush, or brush for a pen.
There's an element of thank you for mentioning that. There's an element of truth to that in the sense that the design skills that I developed over the years, and this, I'll tell you what, this is an amazement to me. I was just thinking about this the other day. I was putting together my next YouTube program, which is going to be on aviation photography of all things. But the skills that I am using to create my YouTube channel digitally are identical to the skills I was using on Douglas Night Shift as a paste-up artist.
Huh.
I swear to God, I'm laying out type, I'm cutting and pasting, I'm arranging, composing, doing whatever. I have a different tool to do it with now. I'm doing it with a computer versus X-Acto blades, cutting myself all the time. No, well, anyway. But, amber lit and press type and all the cool stuff that we used back in those days. I do it now. It's the identical, I swear to God, it's the identical process. I'm just pulling it from digital files instead of a drawer. And so that part can't be ignored as well. But no, you're absolutely right. It's time. John Lennon said it best. I saw this in a music store one time. It's a picture of John Lennon. It said, "Those who do not change with music, music will change. If you don't change without music, music will change without you."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole story. You got to adapt. And so if you can't reinvent yourself in the world of art, going with the flow, you're not going to survive. So anyway, I'm getting off into the weeds here, but
that's what we're here for.
I appreciate the comment. I appreciate the question.
But you know what, Mike? There's an old adage that I always tell the young guys, and that is, you stick with what you know and you develop your craft.
Mm-hmm.
And that incorporates learning a lot of things that you didn't think you were going to learn when you first came to the party.
Yeah.
And you have developed and displayed, phenomenal talent. I mean, I have people that come into my home where I have your paintings, and they look at them and they go, "These are absolutely amazing," and they are.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, what you've done over a vast variety of time. I mean, you go back to when we've discussed on these live streams, you showing, pencil drawings when you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
And you stayed with it, and you went to school and you followed your dream and you worked to make it happen.
Well,
but
Thank
you. That's very kind, and I do appreciate it, Steve. Thank you very much. I'll close with this thought: is that every single time that things got tough and I left aviation, I always wound up coming back to it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's no better story in the world. I was selling cars. I was working at a Ford dealership selling cars, right, to put bread on a table. And I come home on a Sunday night. I go to dinner. We go to a Chinese restaurant, and at the fortune cookie, this is a true story. I couldn't make it up if I tried. The fortune cookie says, "You will soon receive good news from a foreign land." You will soon receive good news from a foreign land. The next morning at 9:30, the phone rings, and I got the account for Airbus.
This sounds like a Twilight Zone episode.
Swear to God, I had 15 beautiful paintings of their all the jets that they sold for the North American Airlines, and that was eventually taken over by Craig. But I always came back to the fold. There was never a time when I, left this hallowed, wonderful world that we all live in of aviation and models and all this wonderful stuff that I didn't return to it somehow after things recovered. So I just wanted to make that point also. But thanks for the kind words. It's very nice of you to say that.
Well, since you brought that up, talking about I believe what Steve was referring to as adaptability, adapt or die. And everybody, as you are well aware, and I've gotten a lot of questions about this, I told you guys when we first started doing all this that, at some point we'd have one pilot in an airliner cockpit. And I said 15, 20 years down the road. But now you can't go on YouTube without getting a news hit about another story about how a lot of these companies are pushing it a lot faster than that. And people have said, that would make me the first officer redundant. I'd have to upgrade to captain and be up there alone. But they were like, the technology may exist where your first officer is actually going to be a virtual first officer on the ground who, is helping several aircraft at one time. And somebody asked me, would you be considered willing to do that? I'm like, see if we got this right. I could sit here in my pajamas and do my job for my computer. I could do that.
I do. That's what I do.
That's what Ken does.
And here's where you come in, Ken. He's going to ask you to make a virtual him.
I can tell you right now with great confidence it cannot be done.
How does that work for cockpit resource management?
Well, it's funny you should bring that up because obviously the pilot community has gone apoplectic over this. They are virtually uniform in this is a bad idea. Now, the Air Force has, and the Navy, or I should say the military. Well, you know what? I was going to say the military. Let me say the government, because non-military entities use drones also, like Border Patrol. The government has pushed drone technology for some very practical reasons. You know, these things can stay on station for a long time. You switch out the operator, no big deal. But the technology is getting more and more proven by the day. And there's a consensus that maybe we don't really need two guys in the cockpit. At least they'd start off hauling boxes. Now, aircraft as they exist right now are set up for two people. But don't forget, you may only have one pilot in the airplane, but you've got another person on the ground who can fly the aircraft remotely. What they kind of are leaving out as part of the flying the ointment is that no one wants to talk about how many drones they lose. But the technology is definitely not there yet. But
one thing that I'd like to say from the computer industry, there is no such thing as a 100% guaranteed unhackable communications device.
Correct.
Or computer. There's no way.
That's been brought up. That security. Now the pilot. I'm going to have to go down a little bit of a dark road here, so I apologize for that in advance. But unfortunately, you guys remember some years ago a German charter airline called Blue Wings?
Yeah.
And we all know what happened there.
Yep.
A first officer who was suffering from depression went wacko, locked the captain out of the cockpit on his potty break, and took the airplane down. That's all I'm going to say about that. So there's now a rule. It's an international rule. No one can be on the flight deck alone. Anytime we go for a potty break, a flight attendant comes up into the flight deck or another pilot comes up in the flight deck so that on, God forbid, somebody goes wonkers, they can open the door and let the other pilot back up. There's no perfect system, but the concern people have is if you put one pilot up there by himself, anything that's done from the ground requires his consent. So he would have to push a consent switch before anything would happen, making the airplane. Now, there will be like an emergency authority where they go override, but he would have the capacity to override the ground signal. So somebody's got something going on in the background that's squawking a lot. Anyway, he would have the ability to override any ground signal so that if somebody hacked the system, he could just turn it off and fly the plane manually. That would be there. But that creates the counter problem of that means the pilot has sole control, and if the pilot turns out to be the problem, the guy, you see how it becomes a cat chasing its tail? So I personally don't think it's a bright idea. I don't think the technology's anywhere near being there yet. You're increasing the workload. And God help us, we've had, and again, I don't like to go down the dark road, but we've had several pilots incapacitated in flight. And they go, well, it can be flown from the ground. Well, maybe not. It's just, you're getting rid of a critical resource. And it's all about, they say it's the pilot shortage and advances in technology. Really, I think more than anything else, it's just about money, which I understand. And that might limit the size. Say maybe a regional aircraft with less than 50 seats can do it, or less than 20 seats. They used to have single pilots in airlines with up to 10 passengers a long time ago. And those guys didn't even have auto, like Cape Air. They only have one pilot, but they only got 8 passengers.
Well, if I was to walk onto a modern jet airliner and look up in the cockpit and saw one guy sitting up there, I wouldn't get on the plane.
Yeah, well, that's if you could see up there because the door was open. Yeah.
Ken, how do you know there's anybody up there at all? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd heard that the cockpit of the future is going to be one pilot and a dog. The pilot is there to monitor the systems, and the dog is there to bite his hand if he touches anything.
You know, there's a career move. We could be breeders.
Well,
But it's not as far. I knew it was coming, but apparently it's a little closer. And in the U.S., it doesn't have that much momentum, but in other countries where they're hard up for pilots, it does. And what I can't believe is, and I covered this in one of my first pilots and prop wash, the cultural changes are dramatic. All of us, and I imagine almost everybody here that's online with us right now, if I had gone to your high school when you were in high school and asked who wants to be a pilot, you'd have had a line around the building.
right.
Nowadays, we can't. Well, I don't know. I really want to be a web influencer.
Okay.
Don't even get me started. Okay, this is going to follow the whole thing with Steve's infamous story of the kid not knowing who John Wayne was. That picture I showed you of the VW, I said this is at the restaurant in the hotel by LaGuardia Airport. And the girl who came up, I show her my airline badge to get my discount because we're airline and that's what we do. That's how we roll. And I say to her, do you need to check with the manager? And she says, I'll go ask Alice. Alice was the manager. She says, I'll go ask Alice. And without skipping a beat, I just went, when she's 10 feet tall. And no one in the bar got the joke.
Yeah, they looked at you.
And so I grabbed my phone, put White Rabbit on YouTube and go, listen. You know, they listen to, oh, I think I've heard that song. My grandmother used to listen to that.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
And I'm like, well, let me tell you something. Your grandma was cool. She rode around in 60s Camaros, wore mini skirts and go-go boots, listened to Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix, and on her worst day, she was cooler than you'll ever be.
Wow.
Okay, I did not say all that, but I sure thought it.
And meanwhile, she probably didn't know what the VW was.
I had to explain it.
Because it didn't have 20s and rockin' sound system.
And it's the DJ. I asked her, I said, what's with the VW? She goes, what? The bus. And I pointed out the bus you have parked on the patio. Oh, that's the DJ booth. No, baby. That's a VW bus. Okay?
But, yeah.
And I'm like, you know, time is a relentless SOB that just keeps on moving. You can't catch it. You can't slow it down unless you can fly the speed of light. And all the stuff that seems so important to us today, you know, back in the day, we look at it back, and it was important to us back in the day. We look back at it now. Here's what I want to do. I had this idea earlier because it's how my brain works when it's working. I've always wanted to be able to find some way that I could write a television show that involved kit models, and I came up with it. And there's a YouTube channel out there, or not a YouTube channel, a website called Modeling Madness. And I was thinking I could take a twist on that. The name of the show would be Model Builders Madness. And what it would do is it would start in the late 1960s, early 70s with a kid going and picking out his model, right? And he gets in the car and his mom's driving him home and he's looking at his model and going through it. He starts to daydream. And it'd be like a Walter Mitty type show where the show is this fantasy the kid has with whatever model he bought that day. He's a jet fighter pilot or he's a tanker or whatever. And it would just be this fantastic story. And it all starts with him buying a model and ends with him building it.
It'd be like the time tunnel with models.
Yeah, something on. There you go. An anthology series like the Time Tunnel with models. Exactly.
But, Max, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
you just, I'm tearing up here. This is beautiful. You just described what we all did with
Exactly.
the models.
Exactly.
Okay, raise your hand. How many built a model wearing a Steve Canyon helmet?
I didn't have one, but I did wear a helmet when I would build models. I had an old Army helmet liner.
But here's, and I've made this point before. This is beautiful. This is fantastic. I've made this point before. When you read the direction sheet about, you know, everything you need to know about your model of the USS Forrestal or whatever it was, The catapults could hurl a Chevy Impala 5 miles and enough, power to power the city of Schenectady, New York for 3 years. That stuff stuck.
Oh yeah.
And it stayed with us. And darn it, if it didn't inspire us to, why are we doing this right this very second? Because of those models. And you made a hell of a point. I mean, I said when you look at a Jack Linwood cover, and he had the figures, the guys wearing the parka and the A&R, and they're unloading the helicopter, and they're watching the Neptune take off. That was us.
Absolutely.
We want to be those guys. The guy hooking up the tow bar on the X3. I'm going to do that someday.
Yep.
And lo and behold, I mean, it was a fantasy, trip. But tell me if I'm wrong. It inspired us to our careers. Yes.
Of course it did.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean,
I rest my case.
and hang on just a second. I'll be right back. You guys keep chatting. I'll be right back. I'm going to just grab something here. You guys have seen this before.
Little did Lou Glazer know what he wrought.
Yeah, and you know what, Linwood as well. When I met Linwood, he was the last guy on the face of the earth to really understand. I say this with love. He was a lovely guy, but he was the last person on the face of the earth to really understand what he had done with his covers. Because when I told him about that, he gives me this look like, "What? What are you nuts?" And those were jobs. I was doing one a week. That was my job. That's what I did. And it's not that he was belittling it necessarily, but he didn't really understand the impact of what he had done to all of us. And it just, God love him. He never really understood that.
This Linwood box art probably did as much as anything to keep my desire to be a pilot alive.
There you go.
And and the same for the Aurora, for the Aero Commander box art that's hanging up in the pilot room and everything. All of these things, and I mean, I still, and I have that very box on display in the pilot room with the built Spitfire in front of it.
Right.
And no, it's, it's funny though. The old saying, "Never meet your heroes," but because you promote them in your mind as something bigger than what they are, but they're just people. But that being said, in a way, I think there's, how can I put this? Not naivete, almost an innocence to the fact that Jack didn't realize what he was doing because he was just a commercial artist making a living doing what he does. Okay, I don't, and I did a bio on Jack, and I know you actually knew him personally, but he had to use his talents to do some stuff in the past that wasn't the kind of stuff he probably wanted to talk about too much because he had to make a living, had to keep food on the table. And
he paid it for Pulp Fiction magazines, and he did all that stuff.
But that probably had some influence on someone somewhere else. But there are a couple of fields of endeavor: sailing, cars, aviation. There are a few fields that they're callings to certain people. Okay, they're more than just a job. They do what they do because it's a calling, and being a sailor, being a pilot, for some people being a cop or a fireman, doctor, something like that. So when an artist, especially one with Jack's just natural eye for things, puts these things out, there's art and music. Well, they're both art. They have a way of getting right into your soul sometimes. And, it's like Jack's painting sort of brought the essence that childhood fantasy or even adult fantasy.
Well, and the people who do that are wired differently than the rest of us.
Probably.
To be able to write music, or to be able to paint a painting that grabs somebody and makes them really look at it. That's sort of that's different. It's a very small percentage of the population that can do that.
It's the ability to be able to visualize it in your head before you make it.
Yeah, and I've mentioned before that a huge part of what made Jack's art what it was is the fact that he was a pilot.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, he knew, you could see the taxiway lights at night and just the control inputs on the airplanes and just all that subtle, the props, the exhausts,
all that subtle stuff that you only know from seeing it yourself. Max, how many beautiful sunrises and sunsets have you looked at through the windshield? And, you know, Jack, he brought that to his artwork, and that was as much of a factor as anything else about it.
I have on my phone an entire section called Sunsets. I still take pictures of them.
Bless you for that.
And now, if you look behind me, one thing about Jack, though, is that Jack, he intuitively understood something about human psychology, and you could tell that by the way he cheated with his backgrounds, with the colors.
Okay.
Look at the C-119 over my shoulder. The Aurora box.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's one of Jack's, but I think it may be. I'm not sure. But the point is that I've been flying a long time. I've never seen a green sky like that, but man, it looks cool.
Yeah, the brown clouds, you're right, you know, I call it the, you know, skies from the planet Dorfnet or something, you know, they don't look real, and yet your eye looks at it and goes, well, of course, you know, the one that always got me was the Revell S kit of the first F-8 Crusader on the deck of the carrier, which if you look at the island looks like a Japanese World War II carrier, that's another story, but it's got a brown sky with biblical rays of light emanating out from the clouds, right? And I remember looking at that at the store and just going, whoa. And I bought it, of course, you know, for 89 cents, and took it home, and it was a stunning, beautiful kit, gorgeous, gold gray plastic. Here I go. But anyway, but, you know, a brown sky with biblical rays of light coming out of brown clouds, I haven't seen that ever, and yet you looked at that cover and it was like, well, yeah, of course. You know, it was perfect.
I will actually tell you one way you can see that. And I learned it by accident. Try using polarized glasses in an airplane with polarized windshield.
Oh, wow.
Everything gets brown and splotchy. You're like, oh my God. What did I... Yeah, because the two polarized lenses will interfere with each other.
Wow.
Look at the stuff we did when we were kids. When you got your 50-cent, dollar, whatever your allowance was, and you knew you didn't have enough money to buy that kit.
Mm-hmm.
And you went and you got bottles from people's trash pails and brought them back to the store at 2 cents a piece. Or you took comic books.
Or you mow somebody's yard.
Yep, you do whatever you had to do to get enough money to go and buy that kit.
Yeah.
Okay. Since you brought that up, I have a Tamiya story for you. Now we're going, I'm thinking we're talking 69, something like that, maybe 70. And I had always heard that Tamiya made the best kits. And mind you, Tamiya had only been in the American market 4 or 5 years at this point. And they'd already established a firm reputation for making great kits. And I used to buy my models at a McCrory's 500 Christos 5 and dime. And it was the only one of only 2 places in town that carried models, that and the Rexall Drugs. Well, anyway, Crouch's Rexall Drugs. Anyway, so I'd go in there, and normally I got a 30-cent a week allowance. I had to wait 4 weeks to have $1.20, which was enough to get the model, pay the 4-cent tax, and usually enough for a hot dog or a Coke if I was lucky. So I go in there, and there were these 2 Tamiya kits, and I can tell you exactly which ones they were. They were the Stridswagen, the S-Tank, and the Soviet SU, I think it was SU-85 tank destroyer. Okay? Neither one of them had a turret. You know, they're both just guns sticking out of chassis. And I wasn't interested in either vehicle because they didn't have turrets, so I didn't see them as real tanks. They looked a little goofy to my 9, 10-year-old know-everything self. But the fact that they were Tamiya, but they were $2.95. And I was like, I would, and they stayed on the shelf for a long time because nobody bought them because they were too expensive. And I can remember for months going in there, and I'd look at all the models, and look at the Aurora airliners and all this other stuff. I remember that's the first time I ever saw a 730 picture of a 737 was the Aurora box art. Okay? And I remember looking at it, and I actually remember the thought that went through my mind when I saw it. I looked at that and went, who does Boeing think they're kidding? That's just a 2-engine 707. You're not fooling anybody. I mean, that's actually the thought I had. I was like 9 years old. So Eventually, I never bought either one of those things because the tanks, because they were too expensive and I didn't think they were real tanks. But that was the first time. But every time I'd go and take them out and fondle them and look at the box, because it was Tamiya. And I knew, despite I wasn't interested in this particular kit, it was Tamiya. And that meant something. I mean, I'm holding something important, something, well done. It was like you were aware of what you were holding, even though you didn't intend to buy it. And it was just a weird sensation of, I don't really want this thing, but I can't help but look at it and admire it. And I'm not saving my quarters for 3 months to buy a tank that doesn't even have a turret.
I've known women like that.
And we're back. Now that same kit would sell for about $40, because they still make it. And I'm kind of like, I don't think the price of styrene's gone up quite that much, but it was the Revell 1/32 scale models. I think it finally broke the dreaded $3 price barrier.
The one kit I always wanted, and I never got because of that very big issue, is that the F10, I think it was the F106 that came with all the ground.
102, the F102.
102. I wanted that thing like it was nobody's business, and I think it was like $398.
They couldn't give them away. I mean, they couldn't sell them because of the price. No one was going to buy it. I mean, you got to figure the average working stiff brought home what, $40 a month or $40 a week?
Maybe. Go on eBay and try and buy one.
Yeah, $1,200.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I know the exact. Mike, I think you covered that very kit in one of your episodes, didn't you?
Yeah, it was $298 originally with all the ground equipment, and then to kind of remedy the stepping in it move of pricing something that high, they reissued the kit with just the airplane and not the ground equipment for $198.
Mm.
Yeah, but the ground equipment was what made the kit,
and the box art.
The box art was great.
It was, if you remember, it was the model on a desktop with all the ground equipment, and the kid looking at it.
Yep.
Lusting in his heart, I believe is the term.
Yeah.
And that was the box art. But that was a stunning kit. And what was really nuts is that the landing gear was linked to the canopy of the model.
Oh, so when you closed her up in the canopy, it made
when
the gear go up and down?
The gear extended. When
Wow,
you closed the canopy, the gear retracted.
That's very cool.
Well, I've got that. Is it Ted Lawson's Gulf Hawk model up here on the shelf in the pilot room, where you pull the prop and rotate it, and the gear retracts and extends. And
there you go.
And I got it to work, but you really need to put a little oil or something on it but I got it to work, and it started sticking over time because it's plastic. So I finally got the gear down and locked it. That's it. It's going on the shelf, wheels down, parked. But that's also one of the only kits I ever bought that actually was designed for you to rig it, because it has little hooks for the rigging.
Oh, okay.
And
and I was going to mention, Max, what you described earlier with the Tamiya kit and holding it in your hands and opening it up and everything. You just described the essence of what made kit collecting what it was, what it became in the 80s and 90s, when guys of our generation suddenly had income and resources and were able to go back and get the kits we couldn't get as kids.
Yes.
Or the one we always wanted for Christmas and never got. And that is what built the hobby, because I've talked many times about my dear departed friend Craig Cadero, who had 1,500 kits in his walk-in closet at the end. And someone asked him about that. I said, why do there was a relative came over, or somebody was visiting, and all these kits, what do you have all those models for? And he turned to him and he said, because it gives me great joy to open the boxes, just look inside, breathe that 1950s air that comes out of the box, look at the parts. It's the same. Think about this, guys. It's the same exact plastic that you first saw when you were 12.
Think about this.
That never changed anything. That never changed. The direction sheet, the decals, it's all exactly the same as what you first saw, and now you own it. And that's what made kit collecting what it was. It
is. And I think about something else sometimes. I'll get a kit that like the little Aurora Cherokee that I got in fine scale model. The only model I've ever gotten that actually ended up in the magazine. And they only made that kit for a few years. I'm thinking, okay, that kit was produced by 1970. And I think about it. Everything I have done in my life since 1970, since I was 10 years old, everything I've done, that kit was in that box waiting for me.
Wow.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
As we speak, there are kit models both in this house and somewhere out in the world sitting vigil, waiting for one of us to take them out, show them the light, and give them the paint. So,
how about that Beaumont kit that I put together? It was made back in '56.
That means that kit was around before I was.
It was a year old. I was a year old when that thing came out.
It's one of the reasons I was glad you built it. And
I searched out the first kit I ever built when I was like 4 years old.
Really?
And found it and built it, and it's in a window box in my basement, and it has the box mounted, and I made a sign, and it says, "And this is how it all began."
I love it.
Was that the Jeep?
That was the Revell Jeep and trailer.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
My grandmother bought it for me, thinking that it was a Jeep and a trailer, not knowing that it was the model kit. And, here it was, and my father went out and got some glue, and I put it together and had plenty of thumbprints on it, but it was together, and that was the first kit I ever built. And about a year ago, I said, I've got to really seriously find that kit, and I searched and searched and searched and searched and searched, and I found it online and bought it. It was complete, not touched, and I built it.
Wow.
And it sits in a place of honor in my basement.
And sadly, when we're all moved on to the next dimension, all the stuff will, who wants this? Should I throw it away? Anybody want this model? God, it breaks my heart.
As my son reminds me when he comes down to my workshop, where all the kits and all the unopened toys and everything are, and he goes, "Yes, and when you're gone, this will all go on eBay."
Hopefully it'll find a good home. Well, guys, it's a little after 9 o'clock. Time for me to go watch Voyager with my wife. I want to thank everybody for coming out. If you guys will stay on the line, I'm going to go ahead and loot the outro so all the glue. We still have 143 people. Hardcore. Super troopers.
I just want to say one thing before we sign off. To quote a phrase from Jay Leno, we are just custodians of these things to take care of them and pass them on.
He ain't wrong.
Wow, that's deep.
That's why Jay Leno sent it, not me.
He's right.
He's right. He's right.
Yeah. I guess we're not doing an after show. Huh?
Ken, we've been doing the after show for the last 30 minutes. This is what you get for not attending staff meetings. We can stay out in your dinghy in the middle of the bay.
Yeah.
I'll sweat my rear end off out there.
Come on, Max. Don't pick on Skipper.
Gilligan!
Oh.
You've had your week, Ken. It's now time to start picking on you about your boat.
Yeah,
the honeymoon period is over.
It's a good story now. I was embarrassed as hell when it happened, but okay, I can tell the story.
Go ahead, Ken. You can tell the story.
I thought you had to go watch Voyager.
Actually,
it's worth waiting to see you tell the story and see the reaction.
Yeah, this we'll wait for.
Gee, thanks.
Ken, I realize it causes you to suffer, but then that is where we derive our joy.
I tell you, last week I could not have told this story. I really couldn't. And, it's embarrassing. Oh, God. Yeah, everybody wants to hear it now. Okay, fine. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for sending me that link to that song. It's been
earworm.
You know how many times I have heard the best day of sailors ever had is the day buys it and the day didn't. I've heard that so many times.
Except for you.
Everybody I talk to said, you know, yeah, I got that. Fine. What about the day after?
I am so biting my lip right now.
Okay.
I don't know. Is it like getting married? I don't know. But, okay. I'll tell the story. All right. So, I have to move the boat. The slip that it's currently in is costing me a fortune because I had to pay for it on another 4 days because the finance people took their sweet little
Ken,
time.
nobody cares about that. You're moving the boat. Get to the part.
Yeah. Backstory. Remember the backstory?
There's no backstory to this. There's the guess what happened when Ken was sailing the boat part.
And I didn't have the logbooks on the boat either.
Hi, see? You're learning.
So, anyway, my wife is not feeling very good. She's got some kind of a stomach bug at the time.
I'm sure she enjoys you
And
sharing that part.
That's what she said it was.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, fine. Anyway, so I need two people on the boat because I don't know the boat well enough to be able to do it all by myself. And so I coerced my son into going, and he didn't really want to go. What?
That's always the first problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens when you use draftees.
Yeah, he wasn't real enthused. He had planned on spending the weekend with his buddies online, you know, gaming and all that other fun stuff. So, anyway, so we get on the boat, and the air conditioning doesn't work, but I knew that. But by the time my son got all of his stuff together, and we finally got to the boat, it was 11 o'clock at night. We're all tired because we've been hauling stuff all over the place and getting onto the boat.
Ken sailing a strange boat in the dark. I think we know where this is going.
So I didn't have time to fix the AC, so we had to sleep that night in a very warm boat with no AC. So that wasn't very much fun. So I get up the next morning, beautiful morning, sun shining, birds are singing, waves are lapping. I was like, yes, this is why I bought the boat. This is beautiful.
Sounds like a Disney movie.
Yeah, really.
Something like that, yeah. Anyway, so fire up the boat, toss the lines, head out into the river, and we're motoring down the river. Hey Max, you got that picture?
I'm looking for
Is
it.
that picture available? Oh, you're working on it? Okay. Anyway, so there's about 100, maybe a 75-yard channel that goes down the intercoastal, and it's about between 12 and 15 feet deep. To the sides of that, it goes to like 4, 3, 2 feet deep.
It
So
becomes
you gotta
shore.
stay in this channel. What?
It becomes shore.
There's still water on it for quite some way, but it's very shallow. And the boat draws 5.5 feet, so you want to stay out of that. So the trip down was pleasant. I had to keep my eye on the depth and where we were going, you know, just to make sure I stayed in that channel. And occasionally some big old power boat would come by and throw up a huge wake, but you know, that's what they do. So we get down to where the slip is that I'm putting the boat in, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the charts, and it says it's 4, 3, and 2 feet deep. And I thought, but how do they get over there? The chart must not be right.
Mistake
Dumbass
number one.
me, instead of sitting there in the deep water thinking, what is wrong with this picture? How do I get in here? I slow the boat down a few knots and turn right into the 4 foot deep mud. Immediately get
Ka-thunk.
stuck.
So Ken is
Haven't
now
I-
stuck.
What?
No, I'm just mocking you. Continue.
Oh, yeah, right.
Come on, you should be used to that by now, Ken.
I didn't hear what he said. So here I am, stuck. Thinking, oh, God, I can't believe I did this. How stupid can you be? Why did you turn out of the channel into 4 feet deep and get stuck? And my son, who's not a boat person, his words, is like,
Mom hears about this?
well, mom is miserable.
Mom's on the
because
boat.
She's hot. She's not feeling good. Now we're stuck. She is swearing up and down she will never step on the boat again. She never wants to see it again.
Well, that could be a good thing. I mean, you know.
Not happy. Okay, Mom is not happy and not feeling good, and here we are stuck.
Ken, you gave her a gift she's going to be using for the rest of your life.
So I'm sitting here thinking,
We're a merciless group, aren't we?
yeah. So you got that diagram up there. No, I said, don't you have the picture of me at the helm?
I'm trying to find it.
So I sent it on your. It's on your phone.
I can't. I'm on the computer. I can't really. I'll see if I can find it and just keep talking.
All right. So anyway, my son comes up and he's looked on his phone and he says, "Well, the good news is the tide's mostly out, but it's not going to be back in all the way until midnight." And I'm thinking, "Oh, great! I got to stay out here until midnight for the boat to come back off." And he said, "Maybe we should get some help." Well, as it turns out, the insurance policy I have includes
Boat tow.
towboat insurance, which if you don't get the insurance, it could cost $250 to $400 to have them tow you out. Okay, so fortunately, my insurance company purchased this for me because it's not expensive to buy, but if you don't have it, you are going to pay through the nose to get your boat out of unstuck. Anyway, so we call them up, the insurance company, and tell them we're stuck. I'm like, okay, where you at? And they send a guy out, and this guy is great. He's really nice. You know, I explained to him, I'm sorry. I did something really stupid. And I know other people give you really hard times about this, but you're here to help me, and whatever I can do to help, please tell me. So he's great. So he hooks his boat up to us, and after no small amount of energy, finally got us unstuck and floating back. And I told him why we were stuck, and he says, "Oh, well, there's a channel down here about 500 yards. You got to turn in and go down there." Really? Well, the markers are on the chart, but the depths are not. You got to know local knowledge to know that stupid-ass channel is there. Great. So he says, well, I'll show you where it is. Okay, so we go down there, because he lives around there. He knows about this channel. He says, yeah, we use this channel to do the boat parade for Christmas. What? You know, they decorate the boats up, and it's all pretty.
Ken, getting off target.
It's a Florida thing. What?
You're getting off target.
Since when did that ever happen?
Okay, let's see. Where's that picture?
Anyway, so we get most of the way down to the slip, and he says, just stay next to the seawall, and you'll be fine. Okay, so he turns around and he leaves. So I'm making sure I stay close. We're okay on the water. I get down to the slip, and I try backing the boat in, and it stops about halfway in. Well, I'm only doing maybe an eighth of a knot. I'm barely moving, so I don't get stuck, but I can't get in. So I thought, well, this is weird. So I turn the boat around, and I try to go back, and I try going in forward. Stops again. I said, oh, great. Now I got no place to put the boat. Because you couldn't find a slip within 200 miles. This was it. I'm like, oh, great. So I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell am I going to do now? So I try calling the guy who owns this, that I rented the slip from. He finally calls me back after 20 minutes and says, That's the only slip I got, basically. I got nothing else. I said, I'll refund your money. Great. Where am I going to put the boat? So I'm coming back out, and I'm looking for some public place I can tie the boat up. And the water's getting pretty shallow, so I thought, okay, this is not good. So I turn around and get stuck again. I'm absolutely just bonkers mad that I did this again in the same day within a few hours of each other. I'm thinking the insurance company is going to drop me. This is great.
Well, Scotty Buzz says Ken's middle name must be liability.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so that didn't make my wife happy. My son's like, I don't believe you did that. Neither can I.
I want to play video games.
And I'm thinking, I'm going to sell the damn boat. This is ridiculous. So we call the boat guy up because he says, if you have any more problems, call me. So we call him up, the rescue guy. He says, okay, I'll be back in a little bit. You got to call the insurance company because they got to clear this. And I was like, oh, great.
You're so
call the insurance
popular.
Huh?
You're going to be so popular.
Well, it gets better. Okay. So now the insurance company won't call the towboat until I got a place to put the boat.
So then you catch 22 personified.
Yeah, so they're trying to find a slip. They found something down in Fort Lauderdale, which is a two-day drive or ride in the boat. There you are. Yeah, 2-day sail. There you go. There I am. That was before we got stuck. I was enjoying life, having a good time. So they can't find anything north either, but there is a marina across the bay, across the river, that we could at least tie up for the night there until we figure out what the heck we're going to do. So he had a hell of a time getting me out of it. He had to spin me around a couple times to try and dug a hole in the mud so he could get my keel loose. He said, how did you get in here? I see 2.5 feet.
It's a gift.
Anyway, so he finally gets me out of there. And for some reason, I don't know what I did, but now the propeller is making a funny thumping noise. Like maybe I bent a blade. I don't know. So rather than try and risk breaking something even more, I didn't even turn the engine on. He just took the boat and towed it all the way back out the secret channel, across the bay, under the bridge, and over into the other marina, and put me up right next to the dock, and I tied up there. This guy is great. He's really good.
And you should hire him as a captain.
He'd feel a lot better than me. I'll guarantee you that. So we tie up to the fuel dock, and there's another boat there too. We're like, okay, well, we're not the only ones. And by that time, we were all spent. We got nothing left. So I hooked the boat up to the power, and thinking, oh, maybe I can get this AC working. But again, it's midnight by the time we finally get everything done. I was like, damn. Hot as hell. At least it wasn't quite as hot as it was the night before. And everybody's just miserable. And so we spent the night there. And next morning, things started to go good. They had a mooring. Yay! They had a mooring. No slip, but they had a mooring. Fortunately, I have a dinghy. And so, great.
And now you have a trolling motor to go on the dinghy.
Huh?
And now you have a trolling motor to go on the dinghy.
Now, yeah, finally. So anyway, so we took it out. We took all the stuff off the boat, so we didn't have to bring it back on the dinghy. And my wife went and found an air-conditioned lounge where she could turn back into a human again because she was still pissed.
I don't blame her.
man, was she mad and miserable. Oh, I felt so sorry for her. That was not the first experience I wanted her to have on the boat, nor my sons. I wanted them to have a fun experience, and it did not turn out that way.
Well, look at the bright side, Ken. From here, the only way you can go is up.
Sell the boat. Believe me, I seriously considered it after getting stuck the second time. Very seriously considered it.
Well, anyway, guys, it's going on 9:30. I'll let you say your goodbyes to the folks. Stay on the line for a minute, though, and I'll loop the outro. Ken, you want to say goodnight, everyone?
Good night, everybody. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope somebody out there somewhere learns from it, at least a little bit, and amuses somebody.
And Steve?
Good night, Goo Troopers, and thanks for watching as always. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Mike?
And now you know why I don't have a boat.
Mike?
Yeah, always a treat to be on board for these things, and thank you so much for allowing me to tell some stories, and I look forward to seeing you pretty soon here, Max.
Okay, I'll talk to you guys in just a second. To all the Glue Troopers out there, I want to thank you for coming out and spending your evening with us. Hope you had a good time. Take care. As always, model on. And let me just...